What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Make sure you guys hit me up on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official, and please send me an email at andrewmarlowe22@gmail.com if you guys want to talk about books or body positivity, all that good stuff. Let me button my shirt here. So we've had a request for how to get through a reading slump, and if you guys were here for my last video, you'll know that we were having some frustrations with these two books. But I've got some good news for you. I kind of took some time away and I actually started to reread this, and I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. And this one I probably won't tackle again right away, but once we're finished with this, as well as the summer reading list, I think we are going to pick this back up. And the reason being is, and also pertains to the subject of this video, basically a reading slump, it all really just comes down to your attitude. And like with these books here, especially this one, I put it down for a couple days. I was like, oh, this is boring. This is blah, blah, blah. And yeah, if you have if you go into something with a negative viewpoint of it's going to be boring, it's old fashioned, it's provincial, I don't understand it. Really what happens when you're confronted with resistance in terms of books within reason, what you have to realize is your resistance to reading something, especially the classics, has more to do with yourself than it has anything to do with the actual book, right? I mean, you can complain to the cows go home about how boring something is or how long something is. I'm just going to turn this light down a wee bit. A little too bright there. That's better. But really it all comes down to your attitude and your willingness to stick with something and your willingness to give something fresh eyes. And also there's the issue of maybe it's just not a good time to be reading that book for whatever reason. If you're trying to read War and Peace when you're like 15 years old, you're not really going to have the life experience to really digest it or understand it. But like I said, it all has to do with your attitude and your willingness to abide by what these authors are trying to get you to abide by. And granted, there's going to be certain books that you're just not interested in for whatever reason, but you've really got to try to stick with things, because if you just it's kind of like I've quit so many things in my life, right? And I don't want these wonderful classics to be one of those. And I don't mean these two in particular, I mean classics in general, because that's kind of my favorite genre. I think that's the most important genre. I'm not saying it's the only genre, but that's kind of where my interest lies. And, I've given up on so many things in my life, and I don't want literature to be one of those. And I wasn't going to give up anyway, but I just was kind of frustrated with these books. But you have to find something that's interesting to you about these books. Like for me, once I started reading this story, Evelina, it's sort of about this metamorphosis in this journey of how a young girl becomes a woman in this sort of provincial upper class society, and what the emotions that she's dealing with when men start showing attraction towards her, and she's sort of dealing with feelings of lust and all kinds of stuff. So it is rather interesting. We're on page 48 now, and we're just going to keep on reading it. And I think sometimes, I'm just going to kind of do this because it's so hot in here. You have to be patient with yourself, obviously, but you also have to be patient with the literature. Don't look at these long classic books as a chore. Look at it as a wonderful journey that you're going to be embarking on. Like Marcel Proust, I was a little frustrated with him, but I kept reading Swann's Way, and now I'm getting back into it. And I think it all really comes down to, when we're talking about reading slumps or resistance towards reading, sometimes you're tired, sometimes you're just not in the mood, sometimes your brain is tired along with your body, like I am today. But I just put in 8 hours at the grocery store, so I am tired, but I still got motivation to read. I still got motivation to make content, and I got to write on top of it. I apologize for the lack of uploads. It's just because we've been typing away on my novel. So we'll talk more about that later. But the resistance or the confusion that you face with these great books, it all really comes down to your attitude. I thought maybe I would have something a little more profound to say as far as the reading slumps go, and we'll talk about some tips and tricks. But number one is maybe take a break, right? Just take a break for a few days, a week, a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's taken me months to read books because I just get, either bored or frustrated. I hope my forehead's not too shiny from all the sweat. It's super buggy here today in Norfolk. So sometimes you do need a break, and I think that's okay. This light is still too bright. I feel like I'm adjusting the wrong button here or something. Just like, oh, is that too dark? It's a little too dark now, but I can't abide this bright light today. It's like triggering my migraine. That's okay. We'll deal with it. So sometimes you just have to take a break. Like this one, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't abide it. I didn't want to go on this journey about Evelina a couple weeks ago when I first started reading it, but then I got away from it and I started thinking, like, I don't want to be a quitter. I don't want to have a whole shelf of books that I couldn't get through because I was too frustrated or I was too ignorant and my attention span wasn't good enough. So you have to it's really a process of self-metamorphosis. And you have to really look at yourself as a person and as a soul and say to yourself, look in the mirror and say, why don't you want to read this book? What is it about you that can't abide this author or can't abide this book? What's lacking in your life, or what life experience have you not had, or maybe sometimes certain subjects are just not interesting, but you've got to make them interesting. That's the whole point of this video. You've got to make your reading interesting. And as far as the classics go, you really can't go wrong because there's so much wonderful, enriching life advice in all of these authors that we've kind of been exploring, all over the map. So if you can stick with it, in 10, 20, 30 years, hopefully you'll still be alive by then. You can talk to people about these wonderful books. You can look at your bookshelf and say, yes, I've read all those, or I've reread several of them. I can talk about Frances Burney. I can talk about Elizabeth Gaskell. I can talk about Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or John Steinbeck because I've put in the work. And that's what we're trying to do. You have to put in the work. You're not going to always get instant gratification. Leo Tolstoy is not instant gratification. Thomas Wolfe is definitely not instant gratification. If you want to read somebody like Bukowski or Stephen King, something like that, yes, that could be instant gratification. There's a time and a place for that. But you're not going to get the same nourishment out of your literature if you're just reading for somebody in the comment section made a good comment that said, I don't like to read for this or that. I like to read for entertainment, and that's understandable. But if you're reading for entertainment only, you're going to miss out on a world of great books and great authors. Now there's a fly in here. So tip number 1 is just take a break, come back to it. Tip number 2 is to find out why you picked out the book in the first place. Maybe it's even just the cover. Go back to the cover, read the introduction, learn a little bit more about the author. And just kind of start over with a fresh mindset. If you go into something with a bad attitude like I was before, you're going to have a bad experience. I remember I felt the same thing about Shakespeare at first. And sometimes I'm just not in the mood for these lofty classics or these old plays, but you have to make them a part of your life, and once you're done reading all this stuff for 5 or 10 years, then you can branch out into just reading for entertainment, but you should always be supplementing things with the classics or the Bible or just the classic authors that we continually go to. There's a reason that these books are classics, right? And if you can't understand that, like I said, it has something more to do with you. It had something more to do with myself that I wasn't ready to face at the time. But now I can go along on this journey about Evelina and kind of live vicariously through her. And what better way can you live vicariously than through reading these great, wonderful classics? Sure, you can watch a TV show, or you can, watch some silly reality show or whatever, but you're not going to get the same beauty, the same nourishment, and the same spiritual enrichment that you will from living vicariously through these authors. And hopefully these authors, you won't even have to live through them vicariously. Benjamin McVoy always talks about living the great books, and that's what we've been trying to do on this channel, is to really take these what these authors are saying, take these characters' life advice and really try to use it. You relate yourself to the characters. For me, it's the writing of Thomas Wolfe. I relate to Eugene Gant and a lot of his characters in there. I relate to Thomas Wolfe's worldview. I relate to Charles Bukowski's worldview. I relate to the epic, grandiose worldview of Leo Tolstoy. So, try to find something in your life that resonates with these great books. But like I said, take a break. We've said that about 5 times already. Take a break. I had some other tips on the top tip of my tongue, but I kind of forgot what they were. But I think it's really just comes down to changing your attitude, taking a break, find something that's interesting about it. Maybe read an article or a review of the book to see if there's something that you're maybe missing that somebody else was able to garnish from the novels that you just can't understand. And there's so many things that we quit in life, like we said, and you don't want to have a shelf full of books that go unread. So I think we'll kind of end it there as far as the reading slumps go. But is there anything else I can say about a reading slump? Should you force yourself to read? I think there's going to be good days and bad days, and I don't think you should just throw your hands up and say, oh, I don't feel like reading, so therefore I'm not going to read. If you did that, you would never go to the gym, you'd never go to work, you'd never write, you'd never do anything. You can't just rely on inspiration, especially when you're a creative person. That the same thing goes with reading the great novels. You can't just wait for the inspiration to strike. Sometimes I would definitely try to keep reading every day, or at least every other day. I take a couple days off once in a while, but on a weekly basis, I'm reading 5 to 6 days of the week, because it's become an important part of my routine, and like I said, sometimes you are tired, you don't have the inspiration, and at least just try to read a page or two, and if you can't abide it, if you're too tired, if your brain's not catching up with how fast the lines are moving, then just close the book and start it again in a couple of days or a week. The sleep cycles that Benjamin McVoy talks about are very important too. You need the sleep cycles. You need to have the experience of the novel sort of go with you on the journey of life, on your own life, and vice versa. You don't want to just blow through these novels because you're not going to be able to really retain anything. So be patient, be vigilant, be productive. Sometimes you're not going to feel like reading, try to read anyway, but you don't have to read if you don't want to. Like, if you're just having a bad day or a bad week, put the books off for a little while and pick up something that will sort of give you that instant gratification temporarily. Pick up Stephen King, pick up Bukowski, whatever it is you're into, Game of Thrones, J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't care what it is that you're reading. Well, I do care because I want you to read the stuff that I'm telling you to read, but it's not, you shouldn't feel guilty for not being able to enjoy something. There's different strokes for different folks, but if you've left the classics behind your entire life, and you never pick them up, I think that's a really sad thing. And the older you get, the harder it is to kind of get into the classics, I think. So you should really start as soon as you can, start when you're young. But at the same point in time, as far as really deep, mature reading goes, you're not going to have those epiphanies when you're 15 and 16 years old. You might have to wait till you're 35, 45, and 50 or 60 to really get the gist feel the power, the grandiose, epic power of these writers. So those are just some quick tips on how to get through a reading slump. Don't force yourself to read, but at the same time, hold yourself accountable, and we'll kind of just leave it at that. We do have some other great content coming up for you guys real soon, so stay tuned for that, and we will talk to you guys next time.